Hi, this is Roger, thanks for dropping by. I'm going to tackle this friedericksianum Hannah today. The main reason is the flowers have gone, or virtually. I know there's still some yellow showing, but those are blooms that are going over and they just haven't fallen off yet. But down here on this new growth there is a single root and the end has been chewed off, which implies there's possibly some snails in the root mass somewhere, probably in behind the root mass, and they come out to play at night. Basically the plant has scale on it in places. I want to try and deal with that, and I'm going to try something a bit different with the scale. I'm going to spray the whole plant with hydrogen peroxide. I've got to do the root base anyway in case there's any snails tucked away in the middle there somewhere, so that was going to be done anyway, and I'm going to spray the whole plant. Now that may or may not kill the the crawler small stage of scale, which is the bit that's the problem. There's no real scale on here, I don't let them get that far. No, these are just crawlers. The actual, scale, the shell type version, I don't seem to see any of those yet. So in their crawler stage, without their protective covering, the hydrogen peroxide might actually just burn them enough to kill them. And then I'll have to give it a good rinse, get all the hydrogen peroxide off, because if it's left on the leaves it can damage them, it can cause cell damage. Get it all rinsed off, then let it dry, and then I'm going to spray the whole plant with the insecticide that I've got, the systemic, and then hopefully that will shift them once and for all and give the new growth a chance to grow. There's scaling around the base. I sort of think of those as not actually doing too much harm, because they're not on the leaves, which is where they do harm. And in the leaf joints is their favourite hiding place on dendrobiums. So that's my plan, and the first thing I want to do is get all the old flower spikes off and give the thing a good tidy up. But I was just going to say, prior to that I need to look at the canes. There's some of these canes need to come off, and literally put the root mass into forcing all of the nutrients and everything into what's left, instead of spreading it around the whole plant. What's left being the growths that are likely to bloom again next year and the new growths, rather than canes that are not going to bloom again. So we'll give it a tidy up, but I need to choose which canes I'm cutting off before I cut the flower spikes off, because I need to see what's bloomed and what hasn't, and what's likely to bloom again. Like this cane here still has a few leaves and hasn't bloomed much. It's only got 2 little flower spikes on it, so that cane can stay. That may well bloom again next year. This one here, it's lost its leaves some time ago, it's badly shriveled, and it's already bloomed, so that one can come off. This also leaves room for the base of the new growths to actually expand. So that's sort of this side done. Turn it round the other way, because it just seems to want to lean over here, and over here is where most of the work's got to be done. See, now if you look at this cane, it's got 2 leaves on the end. That's bloomed right down to here, and there's actually a large cane. So that's taking quite a bit of goodness out of the plant unnecessarily, because it's not going to bloom again. I think this was its last flower basically, so we'll get rid of that one. This one again, no leaves and has bloomed over quite a lot of the cane. It's starting to shrivel and it's on the oldest part of the plant. Those 3 things tell me that that cane can go. It's mainly going to be over this side and in this part of the plant. Here again, bloomed right down. If you have a look on the canes where they bloomed before, it's very rare for blooms to come down below halfway. They don't come out in the lower part of the cane. It tends to be the top third. So if the top third has already bloomed right down, then it's unlikely to bloom again. Now in this process I may lose a few blooms from next year's blooming, but I'll put an awful lot more energy, again, looks like it's finished, into the rest of the plant by doing this. See, that one has only bloomed in those two places, and it could bloom again, and it's got leaves, so that one stays. This one, however, bloomed down to here, that one goes. It's a relatively simple process of elimination, just based on observation really. And we've got one tucked in here, that's coming from a reasonably new part of the plant. It's got no leaves, but it hasn't bloomed over the whole length. It's only bloomed at the very top, so that may well push out a bloom or two next year. So we leave that one. And then everything else really is leaved canes. So I think that'll do for the tidy up. You get several years growth on a friedericksianum. The oldest canes are normally the ones that are the longest and have drooped down the most because of their weight. And then, you know, the previous year's growth, so I'm trying to get these fluffy scale off as I see them, is sort of here. And then we've got this sort of growth, which is worrying, because this is a relatively new growth, but it's stopped growing well short of the length of the cane. So there's a root issue here that needs sorting out. Because if the new growths are starting to stunt and not get up to their full size, then there's something wrong with the plant, because it has grown well for many years. So now's the time to give it a good look over. And as far as new growths are concerned, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, with the potential for more. I'm a little dubious about this big gap here. That could mean I've got 2 plants on here. There's another new growth possibly starting there. So we could have 2 plants here that were just posted together basically. So that's the tidying up done. I'm not trimming any roots. These are active roots. They've even got growing tips on them. So if there is some damage going on at the base of the plant, it's still hydrating via these, except for these are more difficult to hydrate. They've got no moss. So this was wired on. So we'll snip the wire, and I'm going to see if I can undo this wire, because it's probably quite a long piece and it's reusable at the end of the day. Oh, it's not worth it, is it? I've just bought a load of new bonsai wire. I've got rolls of the stuff now. I wanted to wire my what do you call it, didn't I? My pine. That was the one that got done. And there's loads left over. Loads. So we'll take this off. Preferably not my fingers, just the wire. And it's certainly not going back on the piece of bark that side. Even if it went back on this piece of bark, it could go on this side. This is good firm bark, but I don't even know how long this has been on this piece of bark. Therefore I don't know how old the moss is. There's all these unknowns where I lost my records. It could well be that, you know, this has been on this mount a very long time. See that I've just pulled that out. Oh no, I was just going to say, even the wire's got scale on it. But there is some root damage going on here. And I think it's just a matter of fresh moss, fresh piece of wood, fresh piece of bark, and give any new roots that come out as a consequence of these new growths something good to get into. Look at how many places snails could be in there, and you know, they only come out for a very short time, feed and go back and hide again. Those little bush snails are a right pain. Right, so what are we going to do with the base of the plant? First job moss. Moss and the old roots. This area. This is like solid. And these roots are dead. This section. These are not live roots. So I may well get the scissors and start trimming and just get this lot off. It doesn't look good anyway. We do have the long dangly roots which can be incorporated this time. They can get in some moss. There's nothing alive in here. This is dead roots and old moss. And this is the area that's probably causing the problem on the plant. I'm trying to go careful because there are new growths here behind me, but if I knock one or two off, it'll have to be so be it. Right, next question, is this all one plant? I've got some old canes that have been buried in under this lot. What are we doing? Where are the actual roots coming from? Well, we've got a few roots here. That's from this part of the plant with a new growth just about to start. I've got a feeling we've got two plants here, you know. But it's a solid mass. It's not worth separating them. It's just not worth it. You know, as long as I get the worst of the old moss off and give any new roots that come out a nice place to be so that they can progress, I think that'll do. You don't need to go too mad. To get the worst of the moss off, I won't be able to get it all off because, as I say, it's embedded in this area. It's just a solid lump. So that'll have to do. And I daren't run it under the tap to try and get some more off because then the hydrogen peroxide won't work. I'm not sure that the hydrogen peroxide is going to be able to soak right into this area because it's so solid. Well, we'll have to give it a go, won't we? No, we'll give it a go. So I think actually rather than use the hydrogen peroxide on the whole plant, I think I'll just give this root mass a hell of a soaking, leave it for a bit, and then we'll rinse that off, and then I'll take the plant outside and do the whole plant with the systemic insecticide, front, back, underneath, and let it run down into all the leaf joints, get the whole plant to soak a load in, and do the roots so that any, you know, that it can go up through the base of the plant as well. And just hope that that does the job. A lot of the marks on the leaves are down to this what do you call it, myso something or other cell collapse from back when that happened. Leaves like this, that's not insect damage, that's cell structure, just cell failure, and that goes back to the probable cause being that the plants were hot, it was a hot day, and they got sprayed with freezing cold water to cool them off, which is a daft thing to do. It's a shock and it can cause cell damage, and that's what it looks like. Happened on several of the plants, and it can take 5 or 6 weeks before it even shows up. And by then you've forgotten what you've done. How the hell did I do that? You forget that long ago. So there we are, clean up time. See, there's some scale. Let me just show you. As they're on the cane, you can only just see them, but they're there and there on that leaf joint. So they are there, but give the plant a flipping good soak and we'll see where we go from there. Right, I shall have a tidy up. Get the hydrogen peroxide done. I'll have to do that over the sink because I'm going to use a lot, and then I'll rinse that off, and I'm going to spray the plant outside, and then it will have to dry off so that I can handle it again. So the actual mounting of this is probably going to be done in several hours time, but it's lunchtime now, it's 12 something or other, So it's got plenty of time to dry off. I'll leave it outside, get some breeze round it. Knowing my luck, it'll rain. And oh, there's Fluffy Cat having a drink. Well, a non-fluffy cat, as it happens. And then with the mum thing, mum's coming home tomorrow morning. They're setting a bed up for her today, and she's coming home for what will be the last few days, and it is likely to be just a few days. So thanks for all the people who've done the Patreon. That's absolutely wonderful. That sort of amazed me a bit when I got up this morning and I had a look. But it's all set up and running, anybody who wants to do that. I'm also looking at another platform called Buy Me a Coffee, which seems to be more conducive for leaving what might be a small or large one-off donation. Call it like a tip, like you'd leave in a restaurant. But it's called Buy Me a Coffee, and it's geared up to, you know, low volume, one-off. You know, you've seen a video that you really liked or was really helpful for you, and for that video you leave a tip. That's the idea of it. I haven't set that up yet. I've had more than enough to do today. I mean, I'm literally having to start looking at properties now with the intention of taking one of them. And, you know, to find one with a conservatory, I've got 3 counties. I've got Wiltshire, Dorset and Hampshire that I can look at, which still gives me access to the Orchid Societies and to Hannah, which is what I'm trying to achieve. There was only 2 properties in Dorset that were suitable, and they were a very, very long way away. So I had to discount those, I'm afraid. There were several in Hampshire, but quite a few of them were in the centre of Southampton, which I just don't want. It's bad enough being in a town, being in the middle of a city. You know, it can take you 20 minutes to get out, you know, with traffic and stuff, so I'm not happy about that. I did find one in a place called Dibden, which I do actually know, and that would give me access to a good route up to Hannah from there. And it would give me access to both of the Orchid societies without a problem. You know, they both, one of them would be closer and the other one would be farther away, but on a good, you know, on a reasonable run. Plus there's people in that area that share journeys, so you know, it would give me options. The only thing is, I wasn't too happy about where it physically was. It, you know, it looked like it was in a really rough area, but I might not have much choice. And then there were some in Wiltshire as well. There was one, it was a flat unfortunately, but it was ground floor, it had the conservatory, and it was in the middle of a big estate. I don't mean a housing estate, I mean a country estate. And you had access to the grounds and everything, you know, it was all like woodland and trees and fields and open space, because you were in part of a country estate. That looked quite interesting. But all the ones I looked at with Hannah are gone. This is a very buoyant market at the moment, so stuff comes on and goes off quite quickly. Anyway, I was talking to my sister, you know, she said you need to sort of think about getting on with finding yourself somewhere and getting most of your stuff out, you know, so that what's left in the house can be offered to whoever buys it to see if they want it, and then if they don't, it can just go as house clearance. And then, like, okay, the other place is there and some of my stuff's in it, but I'm still here, so I can still show people round. I mean, I'll stay here, you know, right up to the point where somebody's actually committed to buy it, sort of thing, and then get my last few bits and bobs out and all that sort of stuff. And obviously the orchids stay with me, so they stay here as long as I'm here, and then when I finally move out, the orchids are some of my last bits and bobs, and that may have to be a van hire and some help. Get somebody in to help me pack it all up and get it in the van and then take it in one go to wherever I end up. Anyway, right, let's get this plant sorted out. Waffling on again. I'll be back, as they say, or as I say. While I was taking a break, what do you think of this then? Quite a nice driveway. I've actually phoned this estate agent and shown a serious interest. There's woodlands to walk around, you know, you can use the grounds. Quite honestly, I'm not that fussed on what the property's like inside. It's where it is more important to me, and this gets me out of the town, away from traffic and, you know, all that sort of stuff, back out into the countryside, which quite honestly is where I belong. Now, it's the ground floor of this place, which doesn't look much. It doesn't need to look like much. As I said, I'm not that fussed. That's the important bit. On the back, the conservatory. And a bit of garden that's sort of reserved for you. So, you know, it means there's a bit of garden that other people aren't going to be wandering around in. But look at the woodland setting. Yeah? And then inside I've got an open fire. I really missed my open fire at my previous house. It's not big, it doesn't need to be, it's only got me in it. And that would be the new Orchid house. Yeah. It's got 2 bedrooms, there'll be somewhere for Hannah to stay when she comes. And boy, is that a bit, look at that flipping range there. I've never cooked on a range before, I don't know what's involved. Perhaps I'll stick to my halogen oven and microwave. That is an enormous kitchen, but that doesn't mean much to me. It's just, you know, as long as I've got somewhere to cook and wash up, that's all the kitchen is. You know, fridge, freezer, that sort of stuff. Well, what about that then? It's flipping expensive, it's more than I want to pay. But like Hannah said, you only want to move once. Get somewhere you're really going to enjoy, because it could be the place where you spend the rest of your days. So the only problem is the landlord has said no pets. So I've explained to the agent that I'm be prepared to do this as well, even though the cats would be upset. I said I've got 2 elderly house cats. These are cats that stay indoors, sleep most of the time, and are probably not going to be with me for too many more years. They are getting very old, and they would stay in the house. He said, well, the problem with the landlord is, he said with the pets, is he said that he's got on the property loose chickens that, you know, have an area where they can roam free. So he would be worried about that if people brought pets in. I said, no, they're house cats, they stay in the house. And I'd be prepared for them to become house cats, you know, to do that. Anyway, I've been looking at it, I've made contact, my first one. We'll see where we go, but it's quite a bit more expensive than I wanted to pay. But, Hannah said, if it's going to be your final resting place, then get somewhere you're really going to like. And walk in the woods at, you know, sort of 5 in the morning in the summertime with the birds singing, all that sort of stuff. And it's a tiny, well, I'd say it is a small village. There are some very nice properties. I used to, strangely enough, I used to drive through that village twice a day on my way to and from work many, many, many years ago. Anyway, I've made a start. Now we've got a plant to do, haven't we? I was in the middle of doing a mount. Let's get back to the proper stuff, the orchid stuff. Right, hope you enjoyed that little interlude. Nothing to do with orchids, but it could have a long-term effect on the channel. And there's nothing certain in life, so you know that's only a possibility. What I will say now, because I'm sure lots of people have rejoined but may not stay till the end, so I won't wait till the end, I'll do it now. I've said before, but I'll repeat it again, the Patreon site is set up and running, and thanks to all those who've already joined in. That's absolutely great. While I was having my lunch, 2 new people joined. This is all good stuff. Especially bearing in mind what I've just said about that property, which I can't really afford. But I'm going to go for it anyway. Well, if I'm allowed to, you know, it is dependent on the agreement with the cats being able to come. I can't do anything, you know, those are coming with me. If they don't come, I'm not going. So that's that. I've also set up, while I was faffing around in there waiting for the plant to dry, I've set up Buy Me a Coffee, which is another way effectively to support the channel, but in a one-off way, that, as the site implies. You go into the site and you buy a coffee. Effectively, the money that you pay for the coffee is a donation, you know, for the channel. And you can buy 3 coffees or 5 coffees, I believe. You can also sign up for sort of regular monthly payments within there. Personally, I would rather, if you're prepared to put out an outlay on a monthly basis to support the channel for an amount of time, I'd prefer you did that on Patreon, because it's more geared up for that sort of thing, and it's far more geared up to me being able to give something back in the way of goodies that don't get shown on the main channel. So but yeah, you know, I think the Buy Me a Coffee, the use of that would be best is that people who watch all my videos, every now and again there must be one that you really like. Yeah, well, it's like leaving a tip, isn't it? If you had a really good meal, you leave a tip. Well, that's what Buy Me a Coffee, I hope, will work like. Just to go in and say, thanks for that video, that was great, here's a coffee. The trouble is I can't find out how much they charge for the coffee. But I think there is a possibility of making a small donation as a one-off. There's multiple payment options in there, so it looks quite good. The Patreon is actually, if you're on my home page, there's actually a button, become a patron or whatever, actually in the banner heading, but on all of my videos in the description is the link to Patreon and the link to Buy Me a Coffee. So they're both in the description, and that is a permanent description, so every video I load on YouTube gets that as part of the description, plus some words that I add in specific for that particular video. Anyway, the battery's going to run out in a minute. Oh no, it's not too bad. I thought it was getting low. Now what I'm going to do with this, see, this plant used to have these roots hanging down like that, and that makes them very long, but they're very bendy and very flexible. So what I'm going to do is that, and actually put those roots, you can see, over the top of this, and then let them hang down. Now they're not so long from the base of the plant. Now I've got, why I've chosen this mount, that is the hardest piece of cork bark I have ever come across. It's absolutely rock hard. It's soaking wet at the moment because I just poured boiling water all over it to sterilise it. But that's why I chose this one. My hole's up the top here, so it's going to go that way. Yeah, I mean, I know it's traditional to have bark the way it would grow on the tree, but roots don't care. They'll work either way. And it's going on there like that. So the plant is going to be quite close to the top. And a lot of these roots, most of these roots will be in moss. Even though their growing tips are still hanging off the bark, they were before, if you see what I mean. So do I want it that way round, or do I want... Now the trouble is, if I do it that way round, I've got this to... No, well, I'll go with my first thoughts this way round. I was just worried about trapping some of the new growths, but I think I'm okay. So like that. And it'll be wired on. I brought my wire out. For the first time with the hydrogen peroxide, rather than relying on the spray, I actually poured a load over this root base to make sure it got into every nook and cranny. So I didn't rely on the sprayer. So that's how it's going to go. Now that's back to front in as much as we're looking at the back of the leaves, but the new growths are going to come out over the top of that anyway. So yeah, have another think. Could I really? Because really it ought to go the other way round. It's the way it's been grown before. Because the new growths are all pointing upwards at the moment, but then if I do it that way up, so are the canes, and that's not how they were before. Trouble is I've got an awful lot buzzing around in my head at the moment, so it's difficult to concentrate. That's the way I'd like it, with the leaves facing forward. But then most of the new growths are sort of round the back of the plant, and we've got this round the front. No, we'll have to put up with the leaves back to front. I mean, at the end of the day, it's going to be hanging up anyway. You know, so what is the front and the back? So yeah, I'm going to run with it like that, with those roots draped over the top. So it's going to go like that. Yes. Yeah, that's the way it's going to go. Now this time, because I'm using live moss, I'm actually going to put a bit of moss on first. Now, I don't know if you'll be able to see this, but there's two types of moss in here. Whoops! And there's now a huge puddle on the floor. Two types of moss. I've got this fine moss, which I've used a lot. And then last time I collected some, I've got some of this, I keep on tipping, it's gone all over my feet. Some of this type of moss. Which is a more sort of coarse type stuff. So I'm going to use that coarse type stuff underneath, so that there's plenty of air there still, and then use the finer stuff over the top. Should have put my wellies on, shouldn't I? That is actually quite a lot of water. Let me just throw some kitchen towel down there, start soaking it up. Otherwise the cats will be out drinking it. Cats are funny creatures. You put some lovely fresh water down in their dish and they go outside and drink a puddle. Right, so it's going that way up, that's where my hole is, that's the way it's going. Right, so some of this coarse stuff, I've never used this before, but I did notice that some of the plants that came from Marius, he's used this type of moss. Obviously, you know, he would have, I would suggest, had a bit of practice using it, if he's using it. So this is a very loose covering. I don't want loads of moss underneath the roots, I just want a little bit so that there's some moisture amongst them, but there's still plenty of air, and I'm not dependent on ever having to take this moss off, if you see what I mean. That's the theory anyway. Got a strange handling this, it's almost like twiggy. I don't mean long and skinny with a short skirt, you know, twiggy as in on branches. There's going to be loads of people who don't know what the hell I'm talking about. Who remembers Twiggy? When she turned sideways, she disappeared. Right, that's got some underneath. Now what we do is put the plant on top and wire it. Am I going to attempt to wire it off the roll, or should I take a length off? I think we'll attempt to do it off the roll. It's quite bendy. That way I only use what I need. So roots bent round onto the moss and secure the plant. Once the plant's secure, then I can start positioning more moss in different places, like over the top of these roots and some on here. I might end up having to go and get the fishing line, you know, secure the plant with the wire, but I might have to go and get the fishing line to secure the moss, if you see what I mean. I'm going to have to undo this, so let me think. I think 3 will be enough, because I'm not securing the plant really, I'm only securing the base, aren't I? And I can get more wire, it really is at the end of the world. Spending money I haven't got nowadays, or may not have. Right, so nice and tight. Round again. Under those canes. Can't see what I'm doing. under those canes and round about there, so that we're not, no, that's going to cut into that new growth. It'll push on, it will have to push on. Right, so hopefully we've got enough to go round once more, this time over the root ball at the top, to pull them down like that towards the mount. Then if there is any branching goes on. Right, so hopefully that's got the plant. Yes, that's got the plant. Right, so up the other way, gently, and secure the wires. I didn't waste too much. Now what I do is I start a twist like that. There's many ways to do this sort of thing. And then I trim the ends off, because I obviously don't need those anymore. And then get the pliers and apply that twist quite firmly, yeah, so that it pulls tight. Just literally twist and pull at the same time, and then it will tighten up nicely. Like that. So that's that done. Right, so that's got the plant secure. And with wire, if you want to pull it tighter, you can just press on it, and it will go in and stay. Yeah, so you can actually tighten up the loops, get them closer in if you wish to do that. So that's got it nice and tight. Now I'm going to close off and go and get my fishing line, my new big thick fishing line. Right, I think I might have gone to the other extreme with this. We'll have to see how it works. You know, I've gone from so thin you can't see it to something you'd trip over, basically. And it may actually prove to be a problem that it becomes difficult to actually tie a knot. So I'm just trying it out at the moment. Because it's so thick, it won't actually pull tight. I think it may be okay. Well, that's what we've got, so that's what we're going to have to use. Right, let's get we have to do this in two halves. So I'm going to do the top half where we'll put some moss on here, and then I will put some moss on the lower roots, and you know, we'll do some more windings down there. I don't want moss here, I want it here, yeah, and where the roots coming out from this area might go, yeah, and then we'll cover up the existing roots hanging down below where they're going to have moss on both sides of those. So we need some to go round a few times. This is 80-pound breaking strain. I tell you what, if you caught a fish up near that weight, it would pull you out of your boat. It doesn't seem to be a little nook to actually tuck this into, which is a bit of a pain. There isn't. That means it could all fly off. Well, what we'll have to do then is get these scissors out and cut it off, and then put the elastic band back on, I suppose, which is a bit of a pain. Well, it's gone on the floor, in the water of course. Yeah, we have to put the elastic band back on to hold the end. Well, it's no big deal, I suppose, but it's just a bit of a nuisance. Right, you would go in the water, wouldn't you? Never mind. Right, so we've got our... That slip knot's actually no good, because it didn't have a big enough end to tie onto later, you know, when we've been round a few times. So we'll tie another slip knot now, so that we've got something to grab hold of when we come back round to tie the other end when we get there. So come on, concentrate. There we go. Right then, let's get some moss. So heavy, it just keeps pulling itself onto the floor. Right, we now need some of the other type of moss, the fine moss. I don't need a huge amount. The idea is to keep this top part of the plant hydrated and give any new roots somewhere to go, you know, so that they stay moist until they get going and possibly grab hold of the mount, which would be a good idea if that happened. That is the general idea. This is all going to fall off as soon as I try and wrap anything around it. Right, that's it done. Now all we've got to do is get our loop on and start wrapping. I don't mean talking absolute cobblers, not that sort of wrapping. Because quite honestly, that sort of, well, I can't call that music, being a musician. That type of noise has got a letter missing off the front, hasn't it? It's not really rap at all. There's a letter missing. Right, round we go. Well, my sister will be pleased I've started looking. She thinks I'm leaving everything to the last minute. Well, in a way I am, because obviously I don't want to start paying rent on a property I'm not actually going to live in for a while, too far in advance of actually moving in there and living there, if you see what I mean. So I don't want to go too mad and start too early, because obviously that money is effectively wasted. So, right, so that's that bit of moss done. This is the bit I was on about, the loose end here, that long end that I wanted is what I'm going to tie to now. And if that wasn't there, I'd have nothing to tie on, nothing to attach to. So this is where we find out whether it will actually tie a knot. Yeah, it's a clumsy knot, but it's sort of there. It's like tying a rope. Right, so that's that done, that's that bit. Right, back over, I'll turn it up the other way this time because we're working on the other bit of the plant, so we're working down this bottom end now. And I've got new growths here that at the moment are sort of in the way, but they will turn out towards the light. They're still young, and some of them are still like new shoots effectively. So as they grow, they will curl outwards towards the light, and then hopefully there'll be enough of them that we've got canes down here with the leaves pointing the right way, i.e. towards us. That's my theory, which I've got, which I'm sticking to. Now this is going to be impossible, isn't it? To try and wrap this round, it's got to go underneath all of these canes and on top of the moss. That's not going to be easy at all, is it? Especially with that new growth, because I'm going to see if I can pull that new growth out on top of these canes so that it gets held in place, sort of like that. And then if I do that, I might just about be able to wind round. All the moss is going to fall off. I can't think of an easy way to do this. Well, we might have to put up with some swear words. You haven't had any for a very long time. And I don't edit them out, I just take a deep breath when I'm making videos and don't say any. I just think them. I think that's it. I don't want a lot in this area. I just want enough to help those aerial roots hydrate better than they used to. because all I used to be able to do was pour water over them, and they didn't really hydrate that well. Well, at least the top part of them will now, and there are actually some branches with root tips under that moss now, you know, which is now hydrated, so that should help those get going a bit and get a better root system. So, right, that's the easy bit. How's my battery doing? It says 15 minutes. Am I going to make it? Actually, I'm going to break off and change the battery, because if I'm concentrating on this I won't look at that, so I'll just stick another battery in and I'll be back. Right, sorry about that, but if that had it's quite easy for it to pack up and I don't see it because it's out of my line of vision because it's off to my side, so that was worth changing that so that it doesn't conk out halfway through. Well, I don't need to worry about running out of fishing line for a while. There's 50 metres on that roll. Effectively that's enough to do 20 or 30 mounts, big mounts. So we won't be running out of that for a while. You know, I can't stop thinking about that property now. Not the property itself, because quite honestly the inside really doesn't bother me where I live. It's what I see out of the windows and what happens when I open the door and walk out. And where I am now, okay, the back's quite nice out there, but it's everywhere I look is houses, and if I walk out the front it's houses and cars. You know, it's an estate in a town. And so the last place I lived was the last house in the village, so it was right out in the country, and I'd lived there a long time. That's what I'd got used to, and I miss it. So this property would be ideal, but I haven't got it yet. The landlord might have one think about the cats and just decide, nope, not having pets, not having it, and then that'll be it. You know, if that's what the landlord decides. But the landlord is on site. He actually lives in like the manor house, and these two apartments were built on the side for members of his family once upon a time, and they've moved on, so he lets them out, you know, as and when they become empty. And the estate agent knows the landlord quite well. He's been doing his lettings for a long time. Over the years he's always helped him out with that, you know, these apartments. So he's going to put my situation to him and see what he says, and that's all we can do, you know, and hope. The good bit is, like I say, is it doesn't actually become empty till the end of September, beginning of October. So the current tenant isn't getting out until the end of September, and the landlord said he might take a week just to freshen the place up. So that takes it into October, which is about, you know, well, probably the earliest that this place could be sorted out. Despite my sister thinking it's only going to take a couple of weeks, well, no, it isn't. It's going to take quite a while before we can even legally put it on the market. You can't market a house if you don't own it, and we don't own it at the moment. Right, that is it. So we've got moss down below now. We've got moss up above. We've got roots going in both directions, so two effective root bases. Lots of new growths, and those new growths will also produce new roots. So that's what we've got. Right, that's turned out to be a much longer video than I thought, but some people complain if they don't get a long one. And others complain that they are too long and don't watch them all. Well, can't please everybody all the time. So we please some of the people most of the time. And most of the people are happy with whatever I do. Okay, so as I said, I am taking on financial responsibilities that I really can't afford anymore. So everybody that joins in with the Patreon, you know, for some regular payments, gives me some missed one. You know, gives me some extra income for my monthly outlays, which allow me to keep the collection. Without the collection, we've got no YouTube channel. So you know, that's the idea, is that we get me in a position where I can get somewhere, keep the orchid collection, you know, as a single entity in a place where they're going to be reasonably happy, and we carry on just in a different place, but the channel can be maintained. And then, as I said, the Buy Me a Coffee site is just for making like a one-off payment. You know, like as it says, you know, you like that video, buy me a coffee. That's what that site's for, just a one-off small payment as a tip. So there we go. All things are changing. I'd like to say it's exciting, but I'd say it was more worrying than exciting. But as I said, my mum at least comes home to her home tomorrow. As my sister said, that's all she says when she visits: get me home, get me home. I don't like it here. I want to be in my home. So hopefully she can have her last few days in a place where she knows. They had a spare bedroom in the house which has been completely cleared out, and the hospital bed that's going to be provided today, that will be positioned so that she can sit up and look out of the window. Trying to make things as comfortable as possible. So we'll go from there. You know what I've just done, don't you? Completely covered up the hole where the hook goes. Worry about that in a minute. Right, thanks for dropping by, listening to me waffling, and I'll see you next time. But I do have to say, I'm supposed to be doing the magazine at the moment. I'm getting sidetracked left, right and centre. Well, if it's a week late, it'll be a week late, and they'll have to lump it. They can always take it off my hands and do it themselves. Getting quite cold, you know. You volunteer to do stuff, well, don't complain. Never complain to a volunteer, they'll walk away. Right, see you next time. Thanks for dropping by.